Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I was here, two years ago, in occasion of my second book. In occasion of my third book, I'm here again. It's a pleasure. I will give you a brief recap of my life, so to give you a sense of what I have been doing, especially from the point of view of learning from life as opposed to what I did or what I did not. And then I will talk about the theory about consciousness and free will that I have developed over the last 35, 36 years, and to which Professor Dariano has contributed a major piece in the center of this theory that allows us to understand better who we are. Because I thought that we were machines, just like any other scientist thinks. And now I believe that that's an idea that comes from scientism, not from science, because quantum physics actually tells us a very different story if we know how to read what quantum physics is saying. And then I will open up to questions. So I was born in Vicenza in 1941, and I grew up during World War I. I grew up World War II. Well, maybe it was another life. I grew up in a countryside, and so I grew up basically where the familiar sight was people drawing plows with horses or with what do you call it? Not cows, but woi. I never learned that word in English. only in the agricultural era, those words make sense. Anyway, so then I went to a technical high school because I wanted to become an aeronautical engineer, and I didn't want to spend 10 years of studying. I wanted, after being perito aeronautico, I wanted to design airplanes and be done with it. But life had different ideas for me, because they stopped giving aeronautical engineering in the technical high school, the ITIS Rossi of Vicenza, where I went. My father, of course, was teaching philosophy and history in the Liceo Classico, and he was a scholar. My father translated the Enneads of Plotinus, I think you say in English, and also wrote about Schopenhauer, Meister Eckhart, all kinds of Teilhard de Chardin. He was a philosopher that believed in idealism, but I couldn't care less, frankly, because I care only about airplanes, and then later transistors and computers. And so my first job was at Olivetti in 1960, the year when I graduated, as a radio technology perito. And I had the fortune the following year, all of 1961, to design by 60% and build a small electronic computer using transistors that were built by SGS of Agrate, not far from here. And I made it work. And I had 4 technicians working for me. So you might ask, how can a 19-year-old do that? Well, I was lucky because my boss got into an accident. He gave me some books. We were supposed to finish the design of the machine. And then he was away for a month. When I realized that he didn't know much more than I did. So I read the book and designed the rest of the computer. And when he came back, I showed him, here's the design. Really? Okay. So he looked at it and said, wow, it looks good. Go for it. So I built the rest of the computer, which was about 60% left. And especially all the control, the instruction set, and so on. And then I made it work. So that experience set me for my life because it gave me a direction. I understood that transistors were the future, and so I wanted to go back to study physics because I wanted to understand quantum physics, which is, of course, the way transistors work. Why can what is special about crystals that make transistors be so much better than if you don't use a crystal, for example, and things of that sort. So after that, after graduation, I worked for SGS Fairchild, in that time it was called. They were the licensee of Fairchild Semiconductor, the company in Silicon Valley that developed the fundamental technology that was done by a Swiss engineer, Jean Arny, who developed the planar process. In other words, the way to make many transistors all at once instead of making it one at a time. And so on the surface of a silicon wafer, single crystal silicon wafer. That technology, that was the planar process, that technology was the real sea change in electronics and in semiconductors that allowed to now build chips that have hundreds of billions of transistors. In fact, if you consider the flash memories that you have in your pocket, there are chips that have over 1 trillion transistors. They are on 100 different layers, all using the technology that I developed at Fairchild later on, the silicon gate technology, which was a new way to make transistors in integrated circuits with self-aligned gate. That was 1968 when I went from SGS to Fairchild. I was supposed to stay 6 months and go back to SGS, but I'm still there. Not at Fairchild, but I'm still in Silicon Valley. And too long to explain why. So that technology was 5 times faster. You could integrate twice as many transistors, and the leakage current was between 100 and 1,000 less than the MOS technology that was the best that there was around at that time. And so with that technology, we could build all of the pieces of a computer. We could not build semiconductor memories. Dynamic RAMs with conventional metal gate did not work because the leakage was too high. You had to refresh after, almost after every cycle, you had to refresh, so not very good. But if you had to refresh once in 100 cycles or once in 1,000 cycles, well, then you have something. So dynamic memories were made possible by silicon gate. Non-volatile memories possible for silicon gate. The microprocessor possible for silicon gate because at that time, the minimum speed that you needed required 5 times the speed of MOS, and also the density required twice as many transistors to make you on a chip. So that's the technology that actually was later adopted throughout the world and changed the way we make all integrated circuits. In 1968, 95% of the integrated circuits used bipolar technology, which use a different transistor, and bipolar transistor could not be shrunk that much because they were not surface devices. So, the bulk required completely different, the third dimension required completely different techniques, and it was impossible to shrink beyond a certain point. So only that technology allowed to continue to reduce the size, the dimensions of the transistors, and do the marvelous things that we have seen the last 50 years. In 1970, I left Fairchild to join Intel. Intel had a project that was sitting there because nobody could do it, and it was a microprocessor. The architecture of that chip was okay, but again, there was an additional invention that I made that allowed to make it, and I designed the first microprocessor, the 4004, the first 8-bit microprocessor, the 8008. Then I came up with the idea of the 8080, which was a much better processor, 6 times better than the first generation, and also much easier to use, more instructions, and so on. And it took me 9 months to convince my bosses to make it, to allow me to do it. So, so I decided that's it. We lost 9 months to the competition. So I said, not again. And I started my first company, Zilog, in 1974. The 8080 came out early, 1974, and I left Intel at the end of 1974, toward the end of 1974, to start Zilog. And my first product, my first idea was the Z80 microprocessor, which we introduced in March 1976, so a couple of years later. Actually, no, a year and 4 months later, and after leaving Intel. And that product was the first third-generation microprocessor, and it was adopted worldwide, and is still in production today, 46 years later. One of the, was like the Volkswagen, which had a run of probably 50 years of production. Anyway, after Zilog, I started another company, and then another. It takes too long to tell my life, but Zilog was very important for me because at Zilog I learned all kinds of new things, because before that I was running a department, an R&D department at Intel. So I had 80 people, but we were all doing the same thing, products, technologies, and so on. But when you have a company, you have to figure out, people to hire that know finance, that know administration, personnel, not to mention marketing, sales, and production, and so on. So it was that's when I started to get white hair, and also I had a problem with my partner. I started the company with a manager that used to work for me at Intel, and we had some problem developed, and I didn't handle it right, and so it was a major learning. And that's where I learned to take responsibility for my life, especially when things go wrong, and I can easily point the finger to someone that was aggressive toward me. It took me a year or two after I left Zilog to realize my hidden agenda, and the fact that there was a supremacy struggle going on, of which I had not, I didn't know what my motivation was. And so after figuring that out, it was very clear that I caused in great measure what happened by not acting, instead of not by doing something, but by not doing something when I was supposed to do something, which is an even more subtle way in which we often cause problems for ourselves and for others. And it was this capacity, this fact that I understood this, and I said, no, I have to change. This cannot go on. That I prepared the ground for what happened a few years later in my third company, when I had an extraordinary experience of consciousness that actually revealed to me that we are not separate from the universe, which is, everybody knows that we are separate from the universe, right? I mean, that's what scientism is telling us. So in 1986, I started Synaptics, the company that later developed the touchpads and touch screens that you use every day. But in those days, I wanted to make computers that learn using neural networks at a time when the expert in artificial intelligence believed that expert systems were the solution to the problem, not neural networks. Neural networks were stupid things. You probably know that neural networks in the last 10 years have saved the field of artificial intelligence after promises that were never kept for forever. So At that time, I was studying neuroscience, biology. I wanted to understand how the brain works and can we make better neural networks that had better properties than the one that we knew, artificial neural networks that we knew. And so at that time, so I asked myself, when I was studying these books, talk about the taste or the smell. They talk like, everything happens by molecules that are, sensed by some sensor in some way, and then the neural networks, find the patterns of those created of signals created by those sensors, and then there is a recognition of the, of the object, the rose or the, chocolate or cherry, or what have you. But I asked myself, but wait a second, but I recognize the rose by the smell, by the sensation, by the perfume, not by the electrical signals. So what's going on here? I recognize it, a piece of chocolate by the taste, by the way it tastes, not by the signals in my brain. So the signals in my brain must be correlations to what I feel. But it is through what I feel that I recognize something. So why do those books never mention feelings or sensations? They only mention electrical signals. I discover what was later made famous, a philosopher called David Chalmers, who wrote a book and coined the word, the hard problem of consciousness. The hard problem of consciousness is exactly what I discovered 7 years later, studying neuroscience and trying to understand what was going on. Consciousness is the fact that we know through sensations and feelings. David Chalmers called those sensations and feelings qualia. Qualia is just the fact that something feels the way it feels, but we know that something by the way it feels, not by electrical signals. The brain, the computer does not have any consciousness, doesn't feel anything. There is no transformations from electrical signals in the circuits into sensations and feelings. And at that time, I was also unhappy about myself, and I was, I had done everything that I should have been happy, but I wasn't, and that was a problem of consciousness too. It was a problem of feeling. I was not feeling. What did I do? And of course, having learned that I'm responsible for what happened to me, I couldn't blame anybody. I had to blame myself. I must have done something wrong. I want to understand what I've done. What is consciousness? What is it? And one night in Tahoe, I think some of you may have heard this because it's an important turning point for my life. I was during vacation. I was, was with my family skiing. It was a fun time for me, a relaxed time. One night I wake up midnight and was thirsty, so I went to get a glass of water, went back to bed, and while I was just waiting to go back to sleep, from my chest, energy, but physical energy, not a thought, not a image. It was physical coming out of me. So, and this energy was white scintillating light, and it was love, joy and peace. But the love was 10,000, 50,000 times larger than anything that I've ever perceived before. And the joy was mixed with it. Impossible to separate the two. They're just parcel of the same feeling. And the peace I had never felt peace before. I was never where I was supposed to be. I was always thinking what I was going to do next. So I was never here, nor in this place and time where I'm now. And now I'm here and now, but then I was always kind of, my mind was always racing ahead. And so for the first time, wow, this is me. I'm I am this. Because this was also conscious. What was coming out of me was consciousness, was me. And then this thing blows up, kind of covers the entire space, the same light, scintillating, white scintillating light with the same intensity. And my consciousness is everywhere, both inside my body, but also outside of me. And I'm now, a thought forms in my mind. And this thought, I can see that there is a thought before the word, the mental words that normally are associated with the thought. Because the thought was just a clear understanding that this is the stuff of which everything is made, but without the words. Then right after that image, the words, mental words came, oh wow, this is the stuff of which everything is made. And so I also realized that the distinction between a thought before mental words, because the mental words collapse the thought into the meaning of the words, where before there is more meaning. Somehow there is a reduction of meaning coming from the pure thought to the mental word thought. And normally we all have mental thoughts, mental word thoughts. We cannot distinguish anymore between the actual thought and the mental words that describe the thought in our head. And so now the words were, this is the stuff for which everything is made. So now my body was hot, was vibrating just like the scintillating lights that were vibrating in this stuff of which everything is made. And my emotions were everywhere, and were this joy, peace, and love, and mentally understood what this thing is, and spiritually I clearly saw that I was the observer observing myself. But I was the observer observing myself with my point of view. I maintained the only thing that was still the same about me was my identity, my point of view, the fact that I could observe what I was observing, which was me, with the same point of view that I had when I was 5 or, oh my goodness. Sorry. With the same point of view that I had when I was 5 or I was 30 or now when I was almost 50. So I had a sense of unity, in other words, that I never had before. I was the universe observing itself with my point of view. So my point of view was the particular instantiation of the universe in me. But that was it. Now I can say things differently than the way I could have said it after the experience, because 37 years later, I have a theory that explains exactly that this is possible, because we are not machines. But then I could not. And that changed but that experience was more true than anything that I had ever experienced before. It was a direct experience of consciousness that told me that there is a way to know, direct way to know, that goes way beyond also what you can demonstrate with with the logic. Because a theory, a mathematical theory, still starts from the truth, assumed truth, of the postulates that you start with. So the truth, you cannot be sure that it's true. You can only be sure that it's true if the postulates are true, but the postulate cannot be proven to be true. So even in math, there is a problem that truth is assumed in the postulate that you use to prove a theory. And here, the truth was intrinsic in my experience. The truth is, I am not my body. I am a part whole, sort of a part whole of the universe. I am connected with everything. I'm not separate. And that truth was so powerful, but it was so obviously wrong compared to the scientism that was telling me that I'm separate from the world, which is what I believed before, and that's what we all believe. We thought to believe that. So that got me into a completely different direction in my life, though, of course, I was at that time running Synaptics in the early years of Synaptics, and so I continued to run the company, but I started spending about 30–40% of my time studying consciousness. And how do you study consciousness? By experiencing. That's how we know. We know by experiencing. We know through qualia. And now, let's go quickly, because after 20 years of work, personal work, during which I had many other extraordinary experiences of consciousness. For example, I experienced my consciousness as a point of light here. I was just one point of light here. So other times I was everywhere. My consciousness was in the trees, in the buildings that were in front of me. I was everywhere. Another experience of consciousness was there was a field with everything in this field, and there was no observer. No observer. There is only stuff. But then some of this stuff I realized was saying something about me. So this was a memory of when I was a couple of weeks old. That allowed me to understand how we separate from this field where there is the world and us in the same field. Then I experienced out of body, where my consciousness is not even in the body. It's not everywhere in the body and everywhere, but it's out of the body. So how is that possible? And those, of course, are things that many other people have experienced, and the science doesn't want to look at, because obviously it cannot possibly be. But the sense of truth and the sense of this is real, as real, and maybe even more real, what can be considered real, there. And that held me to the point of saying, oh, okay, let's find out. In 20 years of finding out, I came up to the conclusion, the hypothesis, conclusion of my experiential work, the conclusion that consciousness and free will, because consciousness and free will must work together. Because if you think about it, if we did not have free will but were conscious, what good would be consciousness? You would know. Basically, you could not do anything about what you know. You couldn't direct your experience because, the brain would direct your experience, and so on. By the way, this is what most scientism ideas say. They say that consciousness is an epiphenomenon of the brain. Epiphenomenon means it's not even a phenomenon. The brain decides, and then it tells consciousness. Consciousness is some stuff that happens in the brain. We don't know what it does, but who cares? Because it has no cause of power, so who cares? So it tells the consciousness what it has decided to do, and you think that you have this, and you think that that you are conscious, that you decided, when in fact there is no you, you are a machine. That's what scientists is saying. And this was so opposite to what I had experienced that, it's impossible. So when I arrived at those conclusions, that consciousness and free will must be foundational promise. They must exist independent of our body before there is life in the beginning of the universe. Those properties must be there. So I decided, okay, now I have a new objective in life, which is to find out how quantum physics can explain this, because it was obvious that only quantum physics could explain this property. It was obvious. But, by the way, it was obvious even to the early physicists that developed quantum physics, Heisenberg, Schrödinger, Pauli, von Neumann, and so on. All those guys thought that consciousness was in fact collapsing the wave function. Meaning, in quantum physics allow you to tell the possible states that might manifest when you make a measurement. But when you make a measurement, you collapse the wave function, so all these possible states of which you know the probabilities become an actuality that is what you measure. And there is no theory that tells you how that happens. All we know is that that transformation from many possibilities of which you know the probabilities to one actuality is a random event, is just a random event, and is non-algorithmic. That's what the Bell theorems have allowed us to define also, that is non-algorithmic. There is no law that can tell you pure randomness, no law that can tell you what you can measure. And nobody understands why. Why is that? Why can't, not only that, but we also know that the state, the actual state, you are thinking of a particle that moves and, it goes through two slits and, as a wave, so the waves interfere, and then you can measure a particle here, but you only know the probabilities. All that stuff is a way that is a narrative that makes no sense. There is no particle. Particles are state of the fields, inseparable from the field. There is nothing that happens until there is an interaction between fields. Only when there is an interaction between fields, then there is an excited state that appears in space and time as a result of this interaction, and then, which is when you do a measurement. The field that you're measuring, the property of the field that you're measuring, which is an electron, for example, which is a state of a field, is not a particle, it's not an object, it's a state of a field, when, is elicited by the interaction between the field that you're measuring and the field of the measurement instrument. So in this interaction, before you cannot tell anything because nothing has been decided yet. It is decided only at the time when the measurement happens. When the measurement happens, you measure a particle here. So how that happened? Now, you can explain that. Dariano and I can explain that. That is a decision of free will of the field that we are observing. It is the field of the particle that we are observing that makes the decision where to show up. Show up the particle, manifest the particle. It's not the consciousness of the observer that collapses the wave function. It's a completely different idea. It's a free will decision of the observed field. But to have a decision, to have free will, you must be conscious. So where's the consciousness of the field? Aha, that's the second point. The field is conscious because the properties of the state of the field describes the field. The state of the field to be described requires a function that is n-dimensional, and the components of that vector, a function, a vector, the components are complex numbers. They are not real numbers. They are complex numbers. In complex numbers, they are not, we call them numbers, but there is no number that multiplied by itself gives you -1. In fact, complex numbers are very good because they can represent waves. We use them routinely, complex number, to do electrodynamics and what have you, but those are not numbers. Those are not numbers. They operationally can behave like numbers, but they are not numbers. Qualia. So the next step is to say the state of the field that cannot exist in space and time, because space and time is, first of all, it's 3 + 1 dimensions. But even if it was, an n-dimensional space, all these states should be numbers, should not be complex numbers. The complex numbers in quantum physics represent probability amplitudes. Probability amplitudes. Probabilities are not real things. Probability are creations of consciousness. It is only consciousness that creates probabilities. Because only conscious entities want to predict, want to have an assessment of what might happen later. When we use probability for classical physics, for example, what are we doing? Classical physics is deterministic, so the next state is certain. There is no probability in classical physics, but we use probabilities to indicate the lack of knowledge of information that would allow us to compute the next state, which is certain. Not having that knowledge, we make an assessment. Whichever way we do, we make an assessment, and we call that probability. But that's a conscious assessment. It takes consciousness. Look at that. Already we see, again, a connection between consciousness and the quantum state. Probability, in fact, quantum physics does not tell us the next state. Only tells us what we can know about next state. Only what we can know about the next state. Doesn't describe ontology, describes epistemology. Only what we can know, not what it is. From epistemology to ontology, the collapse of the wave function, what is that? We don't know. Decision of free will of the field. And the state of the field has exactly the properties of an inner experience, our inner experience. So we simply say, well, look, if the quantum field experiences its own state, then that's why the state has those properties. And what are those properties? Number one, the quantum state cannot be reproduced. The no-cloning theorem. The no-cloning theorem is about 30 years old. Most people don't know the no-cloning theorem, even if they study quantum physics. I didn't know, because when I studied quantum physics 60 years ago, I never studied, there was not even the concept of quantum information at that time. In fact, at that time, even quarks were considered, maybe they exist, maybe they don't exist, and on it goes. So I graduated in 65, so. But today we know that the quantum state cannot be reproduced. Well, but the information of the computer, program and data can all be reproduced. Exactly. What kind of information is it that cannot be reproduced? Why can we not reproduce that information? Because, like in our case, the experience that we have within ourselves, the state of our own consciousness that we experience is private. I cannot transfer what I experience to another person. I cannot transfer it. The love that I feel for my son, the only way that I can transfer is by saying, I love you, express my love with facial expression, with a caress, whatever I do, but whatever I do is shareable information. Others can observe what I'm saying. But quantum state cannot be reproduced. Not only that, but another theorem, second point, the theorem of Olivo says that when you make a measurement of a quantum state, you can only get 1 bit per quantum bit, where the quantum bit, this quantum state can be expressed with a large number of quantum bits which are entangled, because in physics, all the quantum bits can be entangled, which is a property that exists only in quantum physics. The bits of the classical computer are not entangled. They don't have properties in common. This is 0 and this is 1. There is nothing, it is always 0, it's always 1 unless you change it. But, in quantum physics, if you have an interaction between quantum bits, they can have states in common where if this is 0, this is 1, the other one is 1, or vice versa. Or if this is 0, the other one is more probable to be 1. So it's not just complete entanglement, but it is partial entanglement. All these characteristics are possible in quantum physics. So the quantum state requires quantum information where the qubit is entangled to be described. And the entanglement cannot be known unless you prepare it you cannot be known. You make a measurement, you change it. And you know what you have changed. So the same happens to us. I cannot share what I feel because I cannot reproduce my quantum state, even us, even I. And so I need to translate what I feel into classical information. In fact, there is a type of information which is in between classical and quantum. I call it live information. It's the information that can describe how living cells work. Living cells have particles, atoms, and molecules that interact quantumly inside the boundaries of the cell. Not classically, they interact quantumly. We have studied quantum cells as if they were biochemical systems using classical physics. But classical physics, sort of, because biochemistry comes from quantum physics, really. The special properties of molecules and atoms, they all come from quantum physics, but we study them as if they were classical systems. If we study them properly, we study them as informational systems of a kind that we do not know we don't know what to do yet, because we have to understand that these cells then must be connected with a field that is the one that makes the decision of what to manifest within the cell. And that's why we cannot really do a simulation of a cell with a classical computer, because there is no way to simulate the collapse of the wave function. The collapse of the wave is a random event, but how many possible random events can happen? An infinity of random events, and so only to go a few states, you need to explore a highly dimensional space of possibilities, and then they keep on multiplying. So it's impossible. You see, but we insist that that's the way it is. Although in the last 10 years there is a small number of scientists that have started what they call quantum biology, and in the last few years they're getting some money. They were ostracized until 4 or 5 years ago, and now they can get some money to do experiments. And this is an example of how science proceeds. There is always there are people that hold the fort of orthodoxy, and then some stray people like me that they're saying, no, that's not, it cannot be, you have to change this, and little by little, after efforts and so on, the field changes, and we go from dogmas to dogmas to dogmas to dogmas. Okay, well, the dogmas that we have today about who we are and what the universe is and what part of the universe, how does it work, really, those dogmas are absolutely imprisoning us to the point that we are talking about artificial intelligence as if it could substitute us and things of that sort. So we better change fast the idea of who we are before we get drowned by the powerful people that will control, through controlling artificial intelligence, will control us. I stop here. Have I?
Thank you very much for a very inspiring and unconventional talk.
I am unconventional.
I'm sure there will be lots of questions. Maybe I will start just to break the ice with one question. So you have both experience of academia, university. You went to university when you already had the job and then decided to go to the university, and then you have a long experience as an entrepreneur. How do you see the relationship between academia and industry, especially in terms of this audience of PhD students who chose maybe to pursue reach the highest level of education, which suggestions can you give to the students in terms of their future career? How should they move between academia and industry from your experience, from your point of view?
Well, there are many things that can be said, but fundamentally, I think that going deeper into a specific subject is essential to learn today, to learn a new discipline. But I would recommend to the PhD students not to believe that only that thing that they study is all that exists. In other words, because we become so specialized that we forget about the ties with the rest of it, or we create postulates or assumptions that are valid only within our field, and often those assumptions are contrary to the assumption of somebody that studies an adjacent field or even a far field. So it's essential that we don't lose our openness to what's out there, because if we become too limited, too focused, we will lose our humanity. We will lose our humanity. We don't have just irrational mind. Irrational mind is what we use to do science. But we have heart and we have belly. And the heart is what allows us to communicate empathically, to have compassion, to know each other deeper. And the belly is what allows us to act with heart and with not only rationality, but also the higher intelligence, the intuition, the capacity to know that goes beyond reason. There is that capacity to know that goes beyond reason. That's in science, that's the mind that created the equations that are the foundational equations that we use then to do our work. But we should all be able to create the new equations that describe other realities and connection with realities that today we don't know. So the point that I'm making is that the way we study, the way we work today tries to limit us to the field that we have chosen, and we lose contact with the rest, not only of science, but most importantly, the rest of who we are. And we only use one tool, rationality. And rationality is not enough. Rationality, if we don't use enough rationality, then we have spirituality. And if you use too much, you have science. We need to bring rationality into spirituality, and intuition, the capacity to imagine, and the openness and the other aspects of us into science. And that's what the theory that I'm proposing does, because it unites science and spirituality, the interiority with the exteriority. The fact that for us what matters is the meaning of our experience, not the stuff of the experience, the meaning of the experience. And the symbolic aspect of reality, which is what science studies, are only a description, a sort of, a short description and not sufficient description of the meaning. Because the meaning is the fact that we know from within ourselves what we experience. And let me say a few words here, because there is a step that is seldom talked about, even in cognitive science, that from qualia is the entry point into the quantum nature of who we are. The entry point, which is how we experience information. But the experience of information then, from that experience, we need to go to the meaning of our experience. And what is the process that goes from qualia to meaning? I call it comprehension. Comprehension is to go, the love that I feel is the qualia. But then I say, but what does it mean? Why do I need this? Why do I feel this way? Why is that? Why? So then I get to the meaning of the love, and the process that allows me to get from here to here is comprehension. Computers don't understand, don't comprehend anything because they don't even have qualia. But qualia is not enough, even for us. Qualia is just the entry point of the inner process that basically allows us to know the essence of our experience, which is the meaning. And the essence of our experience is the essence of the meaning of one that through us wants to know itself. Because I start with a single postulate in this theory. It says one, the totality of what exists, is dynamic, holistic, and wants to know itself. Dynamic means it's never the same, instant after instant. It changes continuously. Holistic means it's not made of separable parts. Everything is interconnected within one. So one, call it God, but I want to use words that don't have any religious connotations because I'm trying to do science. But what I have added is one wants to know itself. So it is by adding one wants to know itself that I have introduced into the totality of what exists the concept of free will, which is the will of one, wants to, and consciousness, which is the capacity of one to know itself. What does it mean, the capacity of one to know itself? That's what I call consciousness. It's a capacity to self-reflect. We are made of this stuff that can self-reflect and can reveal to itself its own state. That's how it happens. This is what's going on. So if we start there, then we understand that information, which is the symbolic aspect of information, what we need to use to communicate what we feel. Because to communicate what I feel, since I cannot transfer what I feel directly to the other, I must transform what I feel into symbols to share with others so that we can communicate with each other. We are parts whole of one. So to know myself, I need to know the other. So now this starting point is saying that the universe is cooperative. There is cooperation instead of competition. Life starts with one generating parts wholes of itself through which it knows itself. And now all of a sudden, the principle of life that we dear, the old dear today, which is the purpose of life is the survival of the fittest. Well, the survival of the fittest means I shoot you because I'm more fit than you. So that principle is only competitive. How can it be possible that I have 50 trillion cells that work together to give me unity if the principle of life is that life must, the survival of the fittest? You see, we scientism has codified the understanding of who we are, based on extrapolation of the matter that we have studied. And we are considered as if we were matter, but we are not matter. We are, the body is made of matter, but we are fields. So when the body dies, we don't die because the field doesn't even exist in space and time. Space and time emerges through the experience of what the body tells me as a field about what exists here. You see, we basically need to shift completely our paradigm because that's what we are. And there is ample evidence that this is what's going on. There are hundreds of thousands of people that experience what is called near-death experience. Near-death experience is a person that has a heart failure, heart attack, and the brain doesn't work right after because with the circulation stopping, the brain stopped working, and they experience themselves over the body, looking at the body, which is non-functioning. Then they observe their body being operated on a table, on an operating table in a hospital. they describe exactly what happened in the operation. Then they move into another environment where there is a kind of light that is love, is joy, and they meet their parents that are dead, friends that are dead. They have an encounter which is full of joy and so on. There are hundreds of books that reports this. And there are hundreds of thousands of people that have experienced this type of experience, and they are very similar. And then they had to go back because they are told they had to go back because they haven't finished what they have to do. And so these experiences are these things, this experience that people have, more than 19% are transformative in the sense that the person that has this experience changes its life, is transformed by that experience, just like I've been transformed by my first experience, in the sense that my conception of what is real was shifted. And so all of a sudden one is more open, more compassionate, more empathic, and so on. So this stuff is telling you that there's got to be something else, or else you have to say those hundreds of thousands of people are crazy. And that's what scientism is saying. Scientism is simply saying, if you have this kind of experience, forget it, goes to the psychiatrist. Psychiatrist gives you a couple of pills, and then is that what we want? Or do we want to really go deeper and understand what's going on with us? We are living here in a situations where everything is mechanical. Everything can be explained as if it was classical physics. But quantum physics is more fundamental than classical physics. And quantum physics is saying that the stuff that we think is real is not real. It's actually virtual reality. It's actually virtual reality. This stuff is not real. It's what we experience as real. But it's a construction that is experienced by our field as if it were real, because a portion of our field believes to be the body. And so it's so convinced that it is the body that unless you're shaken up by some other experiences that tells you otherwise, you think you are the body. That's the ego. The ego is a portion of the vaster self that we are, that has been identified early on in life, identified to be the body, as the body, and therefore only pays attention to the information produced by the body. So, it's like the body is a screen where the movie of reality that is created by the body interacting with this other reality is played, and the ego believes that that's reality. So a long-winded answer to your very specific question. But
I will give now voice to the students, so please.
Hi. So you mentioned the importance of sharing information as like finding an approximation of qualia. Mm-hmm. My question is, what do you think languages that we have in this moment have an impact on the quality of approximation we use?
Yeah, absolutely.
For example, math itself or natural language.
Yeah. Basically, the language that we use is the best structure, symbolic structure that we have to express the kind of meaning that we wish to express, to exchange with each other, given our level of evolution. Because remember, now with this new way of thinking, the evolution of the universe is no longer random and based on, random variations in selection, but is based on the evolution of the of the self-knowing of one, which is also the self-knowing of us, because we are simply parts whole of one. Just so that to better understand the concept of part whole, even our body is made of part wholes, because every cell of my body contains the genome of the egg, fertilized egg, that created the entire body. So every cell contains the genome of the entire organism, not of its own stuff, the entire organism. Therefore, that cell later in life can express aspects of itself that belong to the organism, not to itself, later on. That's why there is epigenetics. Epigenetics was another dogma that was ostracized up until 30 years ago, and now we accept epigenetics. So, it's this narrow band thinking that we are trained to use, where we just don't want to go beyond the boundaries of this orthodoxy. So I have between 30 and 50 trillion cells, which are parts whole of my body, just like we are trillions of human beings, which are parts whole of one. You see, it's an holographic principle. The deeper reality is holographic. In fact, physicists have found that quantum information is holographic. Wow, look at that. Why is that? Oh, it's a theorem of mathematics. Why do we have it's a theorem of mathematics. So, when we try to understand what's going on, physics, the way we think normally, doesn't let us get there, because we only are interested not in the why, but in the how. Science only wants to find the how, typically. But the only few scientists that invent something new, they ask themselves why, and then they invent something new. So I'm to the young PhD students, ask yourself also the why, not just the how.
Okay, thank you for coming here. My name is Piero Moi. I'm an electric engineer, so very materialistic, but I have still a heart. So thank you for proposing these topics that are very divisive. I want to make a question about your opinion. I saw something about the Nobel Prizes this year that are regarding, particularly for physics and chemistry, they are about neural networks. I suppose that you heard a lot about that. And what I understood, it's very complicated to go inside these papers, but is that they have found a way to categorize the topology of the graphs that are behind these networks, but they are still asking how do they work. In fact, the intimately way they are behaving is not known. Also, Giorgio Parisi said that for him is an energy minimization problem, according to that. So, but about that, the question is, what is, in your opinion, the idea that is behind these discoveries, and what can be the knowledge that we can get in the next future, and how this could change your mind about the emerging consciousness or the ontology of the consciousness? Because if you know, they are not talking about quantum physics, but relation between something that is a classic physics. Yeah.
I don't think there is anything that can change my mind about the difference between classical computers and quantum reality, because it's already based on experiments. It's already clear that there is a fundamental difference between quantum and classical. So classical, for example, a classical computer cannot have free will. Well, actually, most scientists say there is no free will anyway, right? Most scientists say there is no free will. So if there is no free will, conscience is worthless. Conscience only makes sense in the context of free will. Now, free will, on the other hand, makes sense. Free will absolutely makes sense only in the context of consciousness, because an entity, to exercise free will, must know what it wants. How do you know what you want? if you're not conscious. So you must be conscious to know what you want, and also to have a sense of the reality as it relates to what you want, so that you can make a decision, conscious decision of free will to direct your own experience. So that's, a computer doesn't know what it's doing. Doesn't matter what it, complexity, the minimization of energy, it doesn't matter. It doesn't know. How can it know? To be conscious, its own state must be private. It is not private. Cannot be conscious. Done. And also, you know very well that you can never express what you feel with words. You can only express with words a small portion of what you feel. Okay? So what does it mean, deeply, deeply? That what you feel are not numbers. Words can be reconduced. Any classical symbols can be reconduced to a number, can be represented by a number. But quantum, the quantum state cannot be represented by numbers, and I'm talking real numbers. How can you represent complex numbers where is there a binary number that multiplied by itself gives you -1? There isn't. So you can only represent quantum classic complex numbers in a computer in a certain ways in which it is operational, but conceptually is impossible. Complex numbers go beyond, in terms of representation, they go beyond what real numbers can represent. That's why they can represent waves. See, so, we basically, because we are so interested in just solving problems and making a technology and doing stuff, we never think about why is it that, why does it work that way? But what does it mean? In science, it's forgot that we have a heart and that we have a belly. Belly is the capacity to make decisions which are ethical decisions, ethical actions. Ethics, if you study ethics in science, is another subject. It's not part of science, it's part of ethics, part of philosophy or whatever, religion or whatever. But it's not, but we are whole. We are whole. We don't have separate boxes. That's why spirituality and science today don't talk to each other, because we always create boundaries. We don't want to talk to each other. But we are whole. One is one, meaning not made of separable parts. But we act as if reality was made of separable parts. That's classical physics. Classical physics puts boundaries. Classical physics can only study closed systems, because you have to have a finite thing that you then, and as long as there is no interaction with the environment, it works. So for a while it works, but it's a simplification of a reality which is much deeper, much richer. And we stop at the boundaries. And already even logic doesn't have boundaries, because Gödel's theorem is telling us that you can make statements, in an axiomatic system that cannot be proven to be true or false. So even logic is not enough. That's why we have, non-Euclidean geometries. And in other words, something that you consider wrong, it's not wrong, because if you accept it, you can get Riemannian geometry, and then you can have the theory of Einstein that uses that geometry, or you can decide that it is Lobachevskian, and so you have another geometry that where the parallels never they diverge, right? So three directions now, they're all right, but if this is right, the other two are wrong. But this is what's going on. reality is much richer than what we want to make it, because we are so indoctrinated to put things into boxes that we forget that when we do that, we have eliminated what we don't study, what is in the boundaries. And our humanity is being eliminated today by this way of thinking. And it's time to change that way of thinking. Our humanity is just thrown away because it doesn't fit in the boxes that we have created. This is serious stuff, because we have a threat now with artificial intelligence, and the way they describe it to us, the way they present it to us, where you cannot know if it is science or it is marketing. And we have to be careful. We have to be very careful. The only way to go beyond is to find out who we are. And I'm only telling you, look inside, because you are the only one that can find out who you are. I cannot tell you. You have to be responsible for finding out yourself who you are. And everyone must do the work. I don't have pills for you other than telling you, look inside, because I was unhappy. I look inside and I found that there is much more than what I thought. It can work for you as well.
Thank you very much. I liked it very much. And what I wanted to, it is just very, very quick. I think that since the birth of philosophy, philosophers have reasoned like that.
Yes.
And then, so is it, but also philosophers from the 20th century reasoned like that. And those are the ones that really invented things, or philosophers and physicists, they were both Einstein or whatever, no? So this is the danger that you see now, that these two things are not together anymore in a way.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right. Yeah. But just think about the Tao Te Ching 2,500 years ago. It starts, it says, the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. Wow. When I read it, I never read it before, my awakening experience, but I read it a few years later, and I understood that, wow, this is so right, but I couldn't tell where it's right, because he met with my experience, my extraordinary experience of consciousness. Now I can tell you, the Tao that can be told is the symbolic aspect of reality, and the symbolic aspect of reality is not the eternal Tao, which is what we have inside, our own experience, our own inner experience, the meaning that we have about our life and everything else. They got it 2,500 years ago. We forgot it. We forgot it.
That experience that you had, if I understand correctly, your idea, that was like a decision of the free will of the field, right? So it was, in a sense, a gift, unsolicited. And so my question is, since you make it sound a little bit appealing, so it's something that we cannot like solicit and have, it's something that you get.
Yeah, it's what constitutes who we are.
Yeah.
So we are conscious and we have free will by birth, right? It's a birthright.
Yeah.
But not birthright when we were created as fields, because we are eternal, or we have as much life as one. Because once one has seen itself with the point of view with which he has known itself, creates a field which is just like us.
But my question is, It's a how question. That enlightening experience, it was a gift you got, but we cannot decide to have the same gift. Is it something we should wait for? Or also the following experiences, how did it happen?
To ask yourself, you have the power to have, I think, I don't know where it came from, but if I the plausible way to explain why I got the experience. First, I wanted to understand what consciousness is. And I had many questions, and it didn't match. It didn't make sense. I want to know. Okay? Then, because I wanted to know, and I was intense about it, and I didn't want to know to make a paper or to get a prize or to make a product. No, just wanted to know because it mattered to me. Who I am, open up a little bit the window and, wow, that's what I am. That's it. So, if you want to know the universe is you, responds to you. There you go. Because we are parts all of one. Because we are parts all of one. We have the potentiality of one within us. We are not perishable bodies. We are not perishable bodies. I think it's good news. So if you don't want to, fine with me. I'm happy. So I'm not saying that you have to believe because it's how to say, because I'm saying it. I'm saying, in fact, to believe, the faith of many religions is not what I'm asking, because the faith of many religions is to take my word as truth. No, you have to find yourself. You have the power to find yourself, and then you know, because you have the power to know. But we generally give our power away to the authorities, that is to tell us what we have to know. We have been trained that way. Forget it. You find out by yourself, damn it. Okay?
Hi. My question linked to this last point. You said many times that we are different from machines and we're not machines. Mm-hmm. And what makes us different mainly is the ability to experience qualia in a sense.
And comprehend.
Comprehend.
It goes even beyond qualia.
Exactly. But since we, in your view, we are part of the big one, we are part of the one, what makes us different from machines that, like, I suppose are part of the one too, like in a smaller way, I mean, like...
No, just take a look. What is a computer, okay? What is a computer? I know a little bit about computers. So a computer is a structure, first of all, that we, conscious beings, have made. It did not self-assemble. Like we say, wow, self-assemble, wow. Nobody can tell you how, but we take it for good because there is no other way to say it, to explain it. So we basically, science today uses more miracles than many religions. Okay, how did a cell self-assemble? Come on, guys. I mean, some people have tried giving all the pieces, put them together. If it's a machine, put it together. I give you all the pieces, put it together into a cell that works. They tried for 5 years. No way, not even close. They forget it, throw it away. Okay, so now I forgot what you asked me. Say two words. Say two words. Say two words.
The thing was the question was about the difference between machines and humans.
So a machine, a computer. Okay, a computer works because we have defined the bit, and we have defined how the bit, which is a mental construct, is not in the matter. The mind is not in the matter. The mind is in the field that comprehends. Okay? So we have defined a bit as something which is It's not in the, see, you open a computer, you see the bit going? No, you see signal, analog signal, you know. We have decided how to represent that bit. And as long as the circuits inside recognize that bit reliably, then the computer works. But if you raise the temperature to 100 degrees, the computer doesn't work anymore, because the distinction that we have created and enforced by building the computer that way is gone. And so, you know, the computer is no longer working. Who we are with this field is not in space and time. It doesn't have temperature. It doesn't have the stuff that we have here. This stuff is all symbolic. We think that we are symbols, but we are not symbols. We are the creators of symbols. The computer is a symbol that we created. Our body is a symbol that we created. The cell, we collectively created the cells. They did not come from randomness. There is no randomness that can put together a cell. No way. I can bet all my everything that you cannot have a cell that self-assembles. Just we made it. Why? Because through symbols we understand ourselves. So when our understanding reached the level where we could actually construct possibly a symbol that has the same properties of us. In other words, a symbol which is holographic. A symbol which is holographic. Just think about having the capacity to imagine this. And we then put together a symbol that can self-reproduce. Does a computer self-reproduce? No, we copied the software into another computer. But there is no computer that grows inside a computer and the computer divides in two and we have two computers. But we think as if we have reproduction in a computer simply because we copy the software. That's bullshit. Because we do not want to go there. We do not want to go where there is spirit, where there is heart, where there is ethical courage. But we have to go there for our own good in this life. You guys, you young guys.
Thank you for a very inspiring talk. And I would like to ask you, technology, we all see have a huge impact in human life. And here we are in a technical university. We prepare PhD engineers, scientists. What is your view of a university, or technical university? So it is necessary to integrate the standard subject, technology, science, with something else related to philosophy, ethical subject, or history, I don't know. If you have a view of maybe a slightly different university to reach that consciousness in our technician, engineers better. Thank you.
Well, it cannot be done unless the teachers first learn how to do that, and then we can teach to the students. So it's almost like how do you change a school where, for example, typical school where instead of educating we instruct. Instruction means repeating, learning the outer things, how they work, in the sense of, you use a software, you don't know how it really works, but you use it, okay? That's instruction. You teach a guy how to repair something, and which is kind of semi-intuitive and is good enough. But education is really teaching people how to understand what's going on, understand the deeper working. My father was a good teacher that educated, because many people come to me and say, wow, I still remember your father, was such a, I learned so much how to think. So schools should teach more how to think, how to understand, than to repeat things and, it goes. Now, in a technical school, a lot of that learning becomes self-learning when you do exercises, right? I mean, you go to a lecture, you don't understand much, but then you start doing exercise, and then you begin to understand what the teacher was saying, because during the exercise, you actually, and so, in a technical technical school, the work that you have to do, the experimental work and the exercises are helping to understand, to go deeper. But like I was saying earlier, but seldom the teachers want to even think about why. They are only interested about the how, and the how is instructing, and educating is about teaching the why. So, and the teacher should really begin to do their own work, and then they can then express that in a different way to do teaching, because teaching is also learning. You cannot teach without learning. If you are a good teacher, you got to, My first teaching, I taught after graduating physics. For 1 year did the laboratory of physics of electronics, so 3rd years of physicist, and it was so good, just to learn. By teaching to learn, I enjoyed that very much. But then things were going too slow for me, so I had to get out of there.
Thanks for the talk. You mentioned a group of powerful people at the end of your speech, and this morning I read an article on Corriere. You mentioned a group of powerful people at the end of your speech, and this morning I read an article from Corriere della Sera, and in which you're intervening, and you're defining these people as a group of billionaires seeking to preserve power, following a materialistic philosophy called long-termism. Would you say there might be a clash between the philosophy you were talking about to us today and this materialistic philosophy? And would you say there are maybe measures or countermeasurements to act against this group of people, which in the article is defined as the big tech, which are developing those new technologies like machine learning or ChatGPT and stuff like that?
I'm not sure I understood.
I was asking, would you are you seeing a clash between two philosophies?
A clash?
Right now, a clash, a battle.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And which can be the measurements or the countermeasurements of your side to fight the other philosophy that I see you define as not really good?
I don't see fighting the way to solve clashes between philosophies. Notwithstanding that's what people would do. But frankly, if what I'm saying is worthless, be it. I mean, I'm not going to fight, because I'm simply telling you something that if you're close to being ready, in a sense, you know what to do. And I simply was a messenger of something for you. And, I don't have anything. I don't want my theory, fight. That's not the way to go. The way to go is to, you say, this is what I'm saying. If you don't accept my postulate, that's fine with me, You see what I mean? So, this again, your question begets the foundation of the way we think. The way we think is that we had to fight to get something. So we do wars, we kill each other to do that, which is, in honor of the principle of life, which is survival of the fittest. But my principle of life is the cooperation of all of us to solve our problems and to help us grow and know ourselves ever more. So, you see, so again, we had to.
Thanks.
So when first founding Zilog, how did you get the needed skills to create a company and product, or even know what to do to create it from essentially scratch?
That's what human beings can do, and machines cannot do. They have been to be told what to do, right? So we can figure it out. So I felt that, I could figure it out, and that's it. And I went. And by and large, I made most good decisions. I made some bad decisions, and but how do you learn? By making mistakes. You don't learn by making things right, because when you do things right, you already know. You got things right because you know. But when you make a mistake, then you learn something. So I actually appreciate mistakes. They allow me to learn. Even if the consequences of mistakes sometimes are, can be hard to bear.
Thank you very much. Any final question?
One here.
Thank you so much for what you said to us, which is really awakening. I have two questions which are interrelated. The first question is about this materialistic, reductionistic philosophy, which is, I would say, dominating our society. Mm-hmm. Do you think it is just a social phenomenon, a philosophical phenomenon, cultural phenomenon, or that somehow it is convenient for somebody to spread this point of view on life because it reduces awareness and it is thus makes people more easily controllable? Mm-hmm. And the second question is, you said about the evolution of consciousness, but don't you think that maybe there can be also involution of consciousness, and that maybe in the past some civilizations or some people indeed were more aware than on average we are?
So, I answer the last questions first because I forgot the first question. But if you say two words, I can remember it. I'm getting old, I'm 83, so. But anyway, so the consciousness, the way we understand things allows us to rephrase the first question and then rephrase the other. Okay, because I really.
The first question is: do you think that the current materialistic vision is, let's say, casual part of history, okay, or it is good for some people to spread it because it gives power?
Okay, so I don't think that there is a plot. I don't think that there is a plot. In other words, but most people, when they embrace egotistical principles, in other words, they believe that only what's good for them is what matters. They have lost the sense of community and they work for themselves instead of working for everybody. Those people intuitively know what is in their best interest. Okay? And today, the scientific way of thinking, what is called scientific way of approaching problems and so on, allows to take advantage in ways which are really unethical. For example, the fact that a company produces content which allows a kid to click ever more about what he likes to see and giving only information that allow them to make more money on you. Okay, this is clear. There is companies like Facebook, TikTok do this. TikTok there is actually a lawsuit just happened recently because for the young kids, they make it hard for the kids to exit the game. They conceal the ways how to get out of that game so that they are stuck in playing that game. I mean, this is scientific because everybody knows that the more you click, the more money I make, and so let's make him click more. I mean, this is such a narrow way of thinking without thinking of the consequences of these actions. Okay, and of course the governments, they look somewhere else, and they're not paying attention to this stuff that is going on that is, really damaging a lot of our young kids, this kind of behavior. So there is no plot, but there is this mindset, egotistical mindset that is, which is basically wanting to make more money. I mean, in the U.S., for example, a director of a company, of a company, its only duty is to make more money for the shareholders. Its only duty. Now, of course, it's not. They cannot do that by not following the law, but you can find ways to do things like what I've just said before. Is it ethical to do this thing? We know within ourselves what's ethical. But if you take the point of view that only if you get caught is what matters, then you got a problem, right? So, so what's going on right now is all this kind of gaming the system and working in that thing when if you were to look inside yourself, that you're doing something unethical. The people, we have that compass. We have an ethical compass within ourselves, but we are kind of, little by little we lose it because the world around us doesn't care.
And that's my second question. Do you only see evolution towards a better state of awareness? Oh, because I can see there is also kind of involution trend in terms of awareness and ethics.
Right now, there is an evolutionary trend, okay, in some ways, but it's an evolutionary trend within our society and within, a very narrow band of reality, which is this virtual reality, because at the deeper level for us, there is only growth of self-knowing at the level of the field. We may not do that in a particular life. We may make mistakes that, but that mistake that we made in this life allow us to next life to make a big jump in growth of ourselves. You see, we cannot look at reality in terms, again, of we being the body. We are a field. And if, when one wants to know itself, it can only increase its knowing. It can never decrease it. It has to always increase it or stay the same. But it cannot go back.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.